The audio file you're about to hear was submitted by Sierra B. to the Near Death Experience Research Foundation. For your full review, I will leave the link in the description box below. If you or someone you know has had a near death experience or even any kind of miracle and you would like to share that with our audience, please reach out to sallyknopp.com or sallyknopp@gmail.com. So let's get into the story. I'm really trying to understand what happened to me because I know I didn't die. I essentially had no heartbeat for less than a second because of a drug I was given to reset my heart arrhythmia. Prior to this, I had no frame of reference for what was about to happen to me. I had completely absorbed myself in the Christian notion that you live, die, then go to heaven or hell. There was no in between heaven or hell or anything else whatsoever. The content of this experience is difficult for me to define, but I will do my best with the words the English language provides. Many months prior to this, I had begun experiencing two different arrhythmias, one being the supraventricular tachycardia, or SVT, and the other was the atrial fibrillation, otherwise known as AFib. Other than a heart murmur when I was a child, I had never dealt with any issues until after I had been given a birth control shot. Within the first month of the shot, I had my first SVT. Within 2 months, I had my first AFib. So, back to the day of my event. I was spending time with my husband and kids. We had just gotten done eating tacos as a family. I was quite full and feeling that post-meal lethargy when you've definitely eaten way too much. Just as I sat down to relax, I could see my shirt moving from my heart beating at such a rapid rate. I was sure I was in SVT, so my first response was to try to trigger a reset of my rhythm at home. My electrophysiologist taught me several maneuvers to try at home first before I call an ambulance. I tried several things several times, including putting my face in ice cold water. Nothing was working. I was beginning to panic, which wasn't helping me either. So I made the decision to go to the hospital. In the ambulance, they made me take 4 little aspirins. I remember thinking, why am I taking this? I don't have a headache. I know now that I was having a heart attack. I don't remember much from the drive to the hospital because I was in a panic the whole way. EMTs started an IV. We talked about how young I was to be experiencing heart troubles. We arrived at the hospital. I was transferred to a new bed where I was hooked up to an EKG machine. I heard them say, "She's an AFib." I was thinking how scary it was that I thought I was just SVT. SVT doesn't typically pose any type of life-threatening risk the way that atrial fibrillation can. As I was thanking God that I made it to the hospital without anything more serious happening, that's when another nurse came over to stick me with another IV. I asked, why had I have another IV? And he told me it was because they were going to give me a heart medication to reset my rhythm. Since I didn't know anything about it, I didn't argue. They explained that it was the first thing they tried before moving to more invasive things like cardioversion. I was told that my heart rate would drop down to 0 and then it would go up very quickly. They didn't explain how it would make me feel, just what it would do. The male nurse put the syringe into the IV. I heard a pop in the top of my head, and then I was above my body watching the doctors and nurses moving in the slowest slow motion I had ever seen. It was like a freeze frame of a room where everything was moving so slow. In fact, If I wasn't on the ceiling looking down, I may not have had the perspective to see everything was actually moving at all. My thoughts weren't slow, though. I was taking all this in real time. I don't know how to describe this part, but it's like anything I looked at. I could see it in its complete detail. Although my focus was downward on what was happening, I could perceive happenings in every direction. Just by me shifting my focus, I could see the microscope details, such as texture of the ceiling. It was like I was only a set of invisible eyes with thoughts and feelings larger than life. I looked at this scene for what felt like minutes. Then suddenly, what I was watching all faded away, as if it fell into a spinning vortex. I don't know how to explain it other than it's like everything, the hospital room, myself on bed, all the nurses and doctors, all of it spun out of sight into the vortex, and all that was left was blackness. And when I say blackness, it isn't a word in the English language to describe the darkness I saw. It was almost palpable darkness, like it was holding me in. I had a thought. If I'm there, then how am I here? Where is here? Then all my memories of this life and other lives came flooding back. And I knew those other lives were mine just as much as I knew my current life was mine. I saw flashes of so many lives and moments I had hurt other people or loved other people. There was no judgment in any of this. It was merely observing me without feelings. I felt another presence with me at some point after this. And I say, after this, but the events were not linear or sequential. Everything was happening all at once, though I can only explain it in separate events because that's the only way I can make sense of it for myself. This presence telepathically told me it's time to go back, and this was just a glimpse. Immediately, I was back in my body, seeing with my own eyes as the nurse took the syringe out of my arm. I saw my heart rate going up from apparently zero, and I spent the night in the hospital and was sent home the next day. I've spent the last 12 years trying to understand what this experience was and what it means. I've integrated it enough that I changed my religious beliefs to be more consistent with my experience. I never saw a tunnel, bright lights, or beams. What I felt in the dark space was immense amount of love or being held. It was like the biggest peaceful universal bear hug I've ever felt. It was like being wrapped in velvet in your mom's arms while being loved beyond measure. That void, as people talk about, was not scary to me. I had so much wisdom while I was there. I felt like I was part of everything in that void. I wish I could think of a name for it. It was beautiful and it made life here on earth so confusing and so much like a dream in comparison to that place.